motivation has been one of the most researched concepts in the second language literature. And this definition by Yu Xiude explains why it is such an important concept. And she wrote, and I quote, "It almost goes without saying that good language learners are motivated. Common sense and everyday experience suggest the higher achievers of this world have motivation. Thus, simply defined, we might say that motivation concerns what moves a person to make certain choices, to engage in action, and persist in action." So, as you might have experienced, language learning is an exciting but also a tedious and long process, and we need motivation to keep going. Now, you may know that there are so many different factors in second language learning, and I like this model by Spolsky 1988, which shows three important variables in determining the L2 learning outcomes: motivation, capabilities, and learning opportunities. However, Gardner and Lambert, 1972, argued that motivational factors override the aptitude effect, and aptitude is just another word for capability. So I hope that I have convinced you that motivation is an important concept to study and to consider in research and in teaching. I will mostly cover the L2 motivational self-system by Doignet, 2009, 2010, and this model was born out of the reconceptualization of the integrative concept by Gardner and his associates, as well as the theory on possible self. So I'm going to talk very quickly about the integrative concept and the theory on possible selves. If you have reviewed the integrative concept, you will remember that integrative motivation has three main components: integrativeness, attitudes toward the learning situation, and motivation. And integrativeness comprises of three components: integrative orientation, interest in foreign languages, attitudes toward the L2 community, and attitudes toward the learning situation involve the attitudes toward the teacher and to the language course. Now, motivation consists of three elements here: desire to learn the second language, motivational intensity or the effort, and attitudes toward the learning, towards learning the L2. So you can see that there's quite some overlap among these concepts, but this integrative concept has been very influential for decades and has motivated a lot of studies on motivation in language learning. So I'm going to pause a little bit and ask you a few questions. So what do you think about these concepts? You can pause the video and just think about these questions. So think about your motivation to learn English. How strong is your desire to learn English? How much effort do you put into learning English? Do you have positive attitudes to learning English? Are these concepts related to one another? I would like you to also pause the video and maybe complete this survey here. And these questions come from a study by Takuchi, Majid, and Papi 2009, which investigated the L2 motivation self-system among Japanese, Chinese, and Iranian learners of English. Think about yourselves as learners of English, either now or in the past. And you can give a score from 1 to 6. And these are the questions. Okay, so I'm going to move on. So there has been some criticism of the integrative concept. The reason why someone learns English may not come from the desire to come close to the L2 community or to identify with the community. The concepts may be relevant in the French-Canadian context, where the French-speaking community and the English-speaking community may come into contact with each other, but it may not be so relevant in other contexts as some of the researchers here have argued. Doignet and his colleagues have conducted very large-scale studies into Hungarian students' motivation to learn English. In fact, their participants were about 13,000 learners. And what they found was that integrative concept was highly correlated with motivation to learn English. However, the learners, they really don't have opportunities to talk with English speakers. So maybe a different concept may make more sense. In addition, another criticism is that with the development of world Englishes, English as an international language or English as a lingua franca, what exactly is the L2 community anyway? Researchers and scholars therefore argue that learners may learn English to integrate with the global imagined community as world citizens rather than to identify with native speakers. And drawing on possible self-theory, Dornier suggests that we need to see foreign language as part of an individual's personal core or self-concepts. And these self-concepts, in this line of thinking, individuals have ideas of what they might become, their possible selves, right? What they would like to become and what they are afraid of becoming. And these are called the ideal self, the ought self, and the feared self. These concepts act as self-guides for individuals. Okay, so I have a picture of what someone may imagine himself to become and see the difference between the reality and the ideal self. So these act as self-guides, these concepts act as self-guides by providing incentive, direction, and impetus for action. And these ideal self-guides have a promotion focus. It encourages individuals to take action to narrow the gap between their current self and their ideal self. The ought self-guides have a prevention focus. That is, individuals will act to avoid negative consequences, such as disappointing their parents or having bad grades or missing deadlines. Thinking about myself, I'm motivated by deadlines as well. I tend to do things in the last minute, and sometimes we need that kind of pressure in order to complete a task or to pursue an action. So Dornier proposed a model of the L2 motivational self-system with three main components. The first one is ideal L2 self, which refers to one's hopes, aspirations, or wishes as related to language learning and language use. He wrote, and I quote here, if the person we would like to become speaks an L2, the ideal L2 self is a powerful motivator to learn the L2 because the desire to reduce the discrepancy between our actual and ideal selves, unquote. The second element is ought to L2 self, which refers to our duties and obligations or responsibilities. Learners' motivation to learn an L2 may be to avoid negative consequences. The third component is the L2 learning experience, which concerns situation-specific motives as related to the immediate learning environment, such as the teachers, the curriculum, other learners in the same group. And regarding the third component, you may notice that learners find certain activities and materials more enjoyable and competence enhancing, and therefore are intrinsically interested in those activities. On the other hand, teachers have influences on learners' motivation as well. A controlling teacher may have negative influences on their learners' motivation. And Noel's research, drawing on the self-determination theory, shows that teachers who are perceived as less controlling and provide helpful feedback positively affect learners' motivation. So this is just to show that the immediate learning experience has impacts on learners' motivations. Okay, so let's pause again and think about these questions. Okay, so these are the items that measure the ideal L2 self. Give yourself some scores here and then calculate the average. These are the items belonging to the ought to L2 self component. Also complete the survey and then calculate the average. So what do you think? What's your average score for each section? Are you learning English mainly because it's part of your ideal L2 self or ought to L2 self? Do you think the promotion focus is associated with the ideal L2 self and the prevention focus is associated with the R2 L2 self? What are other factors influencing L2 learning motivation?